The Chronicles of Prydain by Lloyd Alexander. Book 4, Taran Wanderer. Chapter 12, The Wager.
"What, are you so impatient to be gone, Lord Swineherd?"
said Doroth, an edge of mockery in his tone. The dagger twirled in his hands, and he clicked his tongue against his teeth.
"Without a farewell? Without a word of thanks?"
He shook his head.
"This is grave discourtesy to me and to my men. Their feelings are tender. I fear you've deeply wounded them."
The men of Doroth's company had begun to stir. In a moment of panic, Taran glanced at Fluider and Gurgi. Gloff had climbed to his feet and held his sword lightly, almost carelessly. Taran knew the man could bring up the blade in a flash before his own weapon left its sheath. Taran's eyes darted to the horse lines. Another of Doroth's band had drifted close by the steeds, where he stood idly parrying his nails with the point of a hunting knife. Taran gestured for the companions to make no move. Doroth straightened. His eyes were cold.
"Truly, do you mean to part with us? Even warned of the dangers in the hills?"
He shrugged.
"Never say Doroth forces hospitality on unwilling guests. Go, if that's what's in your head. Seek your treasure and a speedy journey to you."
"We meant you no discourtesy," Taran answered. "Bear us no ill will, for we bear you none. Farewell to you and your company." Much relieved, he beckoned Gurgi and the bard and turned away. Doroth's hand gripped his shoulder.
"How then?"
Doroth cried.
"Will you go your way without settling the small matter between us?"
Taran halted, surprised, as Doroth went on.
"Why, there is the payment to be reckoned, Lord Swineherd. Will you cheat me of my fee? We are poor men, Lord, too poor to give where we do not receive."
The warriors laughed harshly. Doroth's heavy face had twisted into a leering humility, which Taran found all the more fearsome by its falsity, and the man cried out in an accusing, begging tone.
"You have eaten our meat and drunk our wine. All night you have slept safely under our protection. Is this worth nothing to you?"
Taran stared at him in astonishment and sudden alarm. Doroth's men had come to gather near their leader. Gurgi edged closer to Taran.
"Protection?"
The Fluider muttered under his breath.
"Who will protect us from Doroth? Protection? Great villain! I call it robbery!"
"And there is more, Lord Swineherd,"
Doroth quickly continued.
"The matter of payment for guiding you to the Lake of Lunette. It is no light journey for my company. The paths are long and harsh."
Taran faced the man squarely. "You have given us food, drink, and shelter," he said, his thoughts racing to seek escape from Doroth's trap. "We will pay their worth. As for your protection on our journey, we neither ask it nor want it."
"My men are willing and waiting, ready to guide you,"
replied Doroth.
"It is you who breaks the bargain."
"I struck no bargain with you, Doroth," Taran answered. Doroth's eyes narrowed.
"Did you not? But you will keep it nonetheless."
The two watched each other in silence for a moment. The warriors stirred restlessly. From Doroth's expression, Taran could not judge whether the man indeed meant to risk battle. If he did, Taran realized coldly, the companions had little chance to escape unharmed. At last he said, "What do you want from us?" Doroth grinned.
"Now you speak wisely. Small scores are quickly settled. We're humble men, Lord. We ask little, far less than what our fee should be. But for the sake of the friendship between us, Doroth will be generous. What shall you give me?"
His eyes went to Taran's belt.
"You carry a fair blade," he said. "It will be mine."
Taran's hand clenched on the pommel. "That you shall not have," he answered quickly. "I offer you bridles and harness from our gear, and even these we can ill afford. Dalbin, my master, gave me this blade, the first that was truly mine, and the first of my manhood. The one I love girded it on me with her own hands. No, Doroth, I do not bargain with my sword." Doroth threw back his head and laughed.
"You make much ado of a piece of iron. Your sweetling girded it to your side. Your first blade. This adds no worth. It is a fair weapon, no more. I've cast away better than that. But the look of this one suits me well enough. Give it into my hand and we are quit.
Dorith's face filled with cruel pleasure as he reached out. Sudden anger goaded Taran. Caution forgotten, he snatched the blade from its sheath and drew back a pace. Have a care, Dorith, Taran cried. Will you take my sword? It will be a costly bargain. You may not live to claim it.
Nor you to keep it,
Dorith answered, undisturbed.
We know each other's thoughts, swineherd. Am I fool enough to risk lives for a trinket? Are you fool enough to stop me? We can learn this easily, Dorith added. To your grief or to mine. Will you try me, my company against yours?
When Taran did not answer, Dorith continued.
My trade is to spill another's blood, not waste my own. And here the matter is easily settled. Pit one of your number against one of mine. A friendly wager, swineherd. Do you dare? The stakes? Your sword!
Gloff had been listening all this while. His villainous face lit up and he struck his hands together. Well spoken, Dorith. We'll see sport after all.
The choice is yours, swineherd,
Dorith said to Taran.
Who was your companion? Or champion? Will that hairy brute you call comrade stand against Gloff? They're both ill-favored enough to be well matched. Or the harper?
The matter's between you and me, Dorith, Taran replied, and none other.
All the better,
Dorith answered.
Do you take the wager then? We two unarmed, win or lose, and the score paid? You have Dorith's word.
Is your word as true as your claim? Taran flung back. I trust no bargain with you. Dorith shrugged.
My men will withdraw beyond the trees where there'll be no help to me if that's what you fear, and so will yours. What say you now? Yes or no?
No, no,
shouted Gurgi.
Kindly master, beware!
Taran looked long at the sword. The blade was plain, the hilt and pommel unadorned. Yet even Dorith had seen the craftsmanship in its making. The day Dalbin had put it in his hands shone bright in Taran's memory as the untarnished metal itself. In Eilonwe, her tart words had not hidden her blush of pride. Still, treasure it though he did, he forced himself to see the blade coldly, as indeed no more than a strip of metal. Doubt rose in his heart. Win or lose, he felt unsure whether Dorith would let the companions free without a pitched battle. He nodded curtly. So be it. Dorith signaled to his band, and Taran watched cautiously until all had made their way a good distance into the woods. At Taran's orders, Fluider and Gurgi untethered Lion and the two steeds and reluctantly withdrew into the opposite direction. Taran flung down his cloak and dropped Eilonwe's horn beside it. Dorith waited, a crafty glint in his eyes, as Taran slowly ungirded the scabbard and thrust the sword into the ground. Taran stepped back. In the instant, Dorith sprang upon him without warning. The force of the burly warrior's charge drove the breath from Taran's lungs and nearly felled him. Dorith grappled with him, and Taran realized the man strove to seize him by the belt and hurl him to earth. Taran flung up his arms and slipped downward out of Dorith's clutches. Cursing, Dorith struck at him with a hard fist, and though Taran escaped the full weight of the blow, it glanced painfully from the side of his head. Ears ringing, Taran sought to disengage himself and regain sure footing, but Dorith pressed his attack without respite. He dared not, Taran understood, let his heavier opponent come to grips with him, for Dorith's powerful arms could snap him in two as the warrior plunged once more against him. Taran snatched the man's forearm and with all his strength swung Dorith head over heels to send him crashing to the ground. But Dorith was on his feet in a flash. Taran crouched to meet the warrior's new attack. For all his weight, Dorith moved quick as a cat. He dropped to one side, spun quickly, and suddenly Taran saw the man's thick fingers gouging at his eyes. As Taran struggled to escape the blinding thrust, Dorith seized him by the hair and wrenched his head backward. The warrior's fist was raised to strike. Taran, gasping at the painful shock, flailed at the man's grinning face. Dorith's hold loosened. Taran tore himself away. For an instant, Dorith seemed bewildered by the rain of blows, and Taran pressed his slight advantage, darting from one side to the other, giving Dorith no chance to gain the upper hand. Dorith dropped suddenly to one knee and caught at Taran with an outflung arm. Striving to tear himself away, Taran felt a sharp, stinging blow to his side. He fell backward, clutching at the hurt. Dorith rose up. He gripped a short-bladed knife drawn from his boot. "Disarm!" Taran cried. "We fight weaponless. You betray me, Dorith." The warrior looked down at him.
"Have you learned which of us is the fool, Lord Swineherd?"
Eilonwy's horn lay within Taran's grasp, and his fingers reached for it. How long, he thought hurriedly, how long before the fair folk might answer his call? Could he hope to keep Dorith at bay? Or, at the last, could he do no more than turn and flee? He yearned desperately to sound the notes, but with an angry shout, he cast aside the battle horn, snatched up his cloak for a shield, and plunged straight against Dorith. The warrior's knife tangled in the folds of the garment. Gaining strength from his anger, Taran ripped the blade from the hand of Dorith, who staggered under the fury of the onslaught and fell to the ground. Taran followed him, seized Dorith by the shoulders, and braced his knee against the warrior's chest. "Cutthroat!" Taran shouted through clenched teeth. "You have taken my life for the sake of a bit of iron!" Dorith's fingers scrambled in the earth. His arm shot up. A handful of dirt and stones pelted against Taran's face. "Fight me now!" cried Dorith with a mighty heave. Taran clapped hands to his smarting eyes, tears streaming down his face, and he groped for the warrior, who sprang away in an instant. Taran stumbled forward on hands and knees. Dorith's heavy boot drove into his ribs. Taran cried out, then fell, doubled up and panting. He strove to rise, but even the strength of his anger could not bring him to his feet. He sank down, his face pressed against the ground. Dorith strode to the sword and plucked it from the turf. He turned to Taran. "I spare your life, swineherd," he cried scornfully. "It means nothing to me, and I have no wish for it. Should we meet again, it may not go as well for you." Taran raised his head. In Dorith's eyes, he saw only the cold hatred that seemed to reach out to blight or shatter all it touched. "You've won nothing," Taran whispered. "What have you gained worth more to you than to me?" "The getting pleased me, swineherd. The taking pleases me all the more." Dorith tossed the sword in the air, caught it again, then threw back his head and burst into raw laughter. He turned on his heel and strode into the forest. Even after his strength had come back and the pain in his side had dwindled to a dull ache, Taran sat a long while on the ground before gathering up his belongings, the torn cloak, the battle horn, the empty scabbard, and setting off to join Fflewddur and Gurgi. Dorith had gone. There was no sign of him, but the laughter still rang in Taran's ears.